The rain hammered against my apartment window like angry fists matching the pounding in my chest. I clutched my phone, its cracked screen reflecting the desperation in my eyes. 3 missed rent payments, 2 final notices, and 1 eviction warning. The numbers blurred together as I counted the meager bills spread across my secondhand coffee table for the 5th time. I whispered to the empty room, my voice catching. $342. Not even half of what I needed. The leaky ceiling dripped steadily into a plastic bucket in the corner, the rhythmic sound a mocking countdown to homelessness. I tucked a strand of damp hair behind my ear and reached for my phone again. Jake had promised to help, swore he would transfer the money he owed me by today. 6 months ago, when I had emptied my savings to help him pay for his mom's medical bills, he had looked me in the eyes and promised he would pay me back. Last week, he had texted that today was the day. My fingers trembled as I pulled up his contact. I texted him, just checking about the transfer. Landlord's threatening eviction. Hope everything is okay with you and your mom, Emma. I hit send. The night shift at the diner had left my feet blistered and my back aching, but there was no time to rest. I had another shift in 5 hours, and the morning one barely covered groceries. My phone buzzed and I lunged for it, nearly knocking over the cold cup of tea I had been nursing. The reply read, "Wrong number." 2 words, cold and dismissive. My stomach clenched. I texted back, "Sorry, I was trying to reach Jake. This is the number he gave me last month." I double-checked the number. It was the same one Jake had texted from recently, though he had a habit of changing phones. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. The reply came, "No Jake here. Do not text again." Something about the curtains made me desperate. I was about to lose everything. I typed, "Please, if you know him. I really need to reach him. He owes me money for his mom's medical bills, and I am about to be evicted. My name is Emma." The response was immediate. "How much?" I hesitated, fingers hovering over the keypad. A stranger asking about money set off warning bells, but I was drowning. I replied, "He owes me $800. I lent him everything I had. The 3 dots appeared and vanished several times. Finally, a single word appeared. Address. My blood ran cold. I texted back, "Why would you need my address?" The reply was 2 words. To help. Those 2 words hung in the digital space between us. Dangerous and tempting. I set the phone down, my hands shaking. The ceiling dripped faster as the rain intensified, and a new leak started in the kitchen. I glanced at the final eviction notice on the counter, the red lettering like a scream on the page. I texted again. "I do not give my address to strangers. I am sorry for bothering you." I turned the phone face down and pressed my palms against my eyes. Stupid, desperate move. Jake had clearly given me a fake number, and now I was texting with God knows who. The phone buzzed again, insistent. The message read, "Your choice. Offer expires in 5 minutes." The desperation clawed at my throat. I had no family, no friends who could lend that kind of money. My coworkers at the diner were in the same sinking boat. 5 minutes to decide between stranger, danger, and homelessness. 4 minutes later, I sent my address with trembling fingers. The reply came, "Someone will come. Be ready." The cryptic message sent ice through my veins. Be ready for what? I paced the tiny apartment, alternating between panic and a strange, hollow resignation. The worst they could do was rob me, and I had nothing worth taking. The best and least likely was that this person somehow knew Jake and would help. I changed out of my diner uniform into jeans and a faded sweater, throwing essentials into my backpack just in case I needed to run. My heart nearly exploded when precisely 45 minutes later, a heavy knock rattled my door. Through the peephole, I saw a mountain of a man in an expensive black coat, his face impassive beneath a close-cropped haircut. Behind him stood another man, leaner but no less intimidating, scanning the hallway with practiced precision. I called out, my voice embarrassingly small. "Who is it?" The mountain replied, his voice surprisingly gentle for his size. "Mr. Castellano sent us." I did not recognize the name. I said, "I do not know any Mr. Castellano." He held up a phone showing our conversation and said, "You texted him. We are here to help with your situation." My throat dried. I asked, "How do I know you are not here to hurt me?" The man sighed, then reached into his coat. I flinched, but he pulled out an envelope and held it up to the peephole. Through the white paper, I could make out the unmistakable shape of cash. He said, "Miss, we can leave this in the hallway if you prefer, but Mr. Castellano requested we ensure it reaches you personally." I swallowed hard, undid the chain with shaking hands, and opened the door a crack. The envelope appeared in the space, thick and heavy. He then asked, "May we come in? Mr. Castellano has additional questions." Every warning bell in my head was clanging. but the envelope in my hands felt substantial. I peeked inside. More cash than I had seen in my entire life. Not just the $800 I needed, but several thousand at least. I whispered, trying to hand it back. There has been a mistake. I only needed $800. The mountain's face remained impassive. He said, "No mistake. May we come in now? It is not a request we make twice." I stepped back, the door swinging wider. They entered, filling my tiny apartment with their presence. The second man immediately walked through each room, checking windows and closets, while the first stood in my living room, looking strangely out of place next to my salvaged furniture. I said, still clutching the envelope. "There has been a misunderstanding. I was trying to reach someone named Jake." The mountain nodded to his partner, who had finished his inspection and now stood by the door. He said, "Mr. Castellano is aware. He would like to speak with you in person." "In person?" I said. "I do not even know who he is." He replied simply, "He is the man you texted, and he rarely takes personal interest in wrong numbers." A chill ran down my spine. I said, "I cannot just go meet a stranger." The man pointed out, "You already took his money." His eyes flicked to the leaky ceiling, the peeling wallpaper, the stack of past due notices. He continued, "Looks like you need it and more." I said, "I only needed 800. He replied, "Yes, but your problems will not end there, will they?" His assessment was matter of fact, not unkind. He added, "Mr. Castellano is offering an opportunity. Your choice." My mind raced. The name Castellano tickled something in my memory. Something from the local news, perhaps. The way these men carried themselves, the casual display of money, the subtle but unmistakable bulges under their jackets that I was trying desperately not to notice. I asked, though I was beginning to suspect the answer, "Who exactly is Mr. Castellano?" The mountain almost smiled and said, "Someone who can solve problems permanently." The second man opened the door and said, "Time to decide. The car is waiting." I looked around my crumbling apartment, the home I was about to lose anyway. I thought of the endless cycle of double shifts and still coming up short, of Jake's betrayal, of having nowhere to go. I grabbed my backpack, already packed for the worst. I asked, trying to sound braver than I felt, "If I do not like what I hear, I can leave?" The mountain said, "Mr. Castellano is not in the habit of keeping people who do not wish to be kept." Then he added, "Usually." That was not remotely reassuring, but I followed them down the stairs, to where a gleaming black Escalade with tinted windows waited at the curb. The rain had stopped, leaving the world with that strange, suspended stillness that comes after a storm. As the second man opened the door, I hesitated at the threshold of a decision that felt irrevocable. The envelope of cash weighed heavy in my pocket. Something told me that if I got into this car, my life would never be the same. The question was whether that would be for better or worse. I climbed in, the leather seat cool against my legs. The door closed with a soft, expensive thud, sealing me in darkness as we pulled away from the curb. We were departing from the familiar life I had always known, leaving it behind. Our journey led toward a grand mansion and a man whose significant text messages had truly changed everything. The drive was long and silent. We left my neighborhood, passed through downtown, and eventually reached the outskirts where houses grew larger and further apart. The men did not speak, and I was too nervous to break the silence. Instead, I watched the city transform outside the window from cramped apartment buildings to manicured estates. After nearly an hour, we turned onto a private road that wound through dense trees. At the end stood a pair of wrought iron gates that swung open as we approached. Beyond them, a sprawling mansion rose from perfectly landscaped grounds, all stone and glass and imposing angles. The mountain finally spoke as the car rolled to a stop at the front entrance. He said, "We are here." My door opened before I could reach for the handle. A third man in a suit stood waiting. He said with a slight nod, "Miss Emma, Mr. Castellano is waiting in his study." I stepped out on wobbly legs, clutching my backpack to my chest like a shield. The mansion loomed above me, intimidating and cold, despite warm lights glowing from within. As I followed the man through massive double doors into a soaring entryway, I had the distinct sensation of walking willingly into a beautiful trap. The interior was all dark woods, marble floors, and artwork that looked like it belonged in a museum. Our footsteps echoed as we walked down a long hallway, passing rooms glimpsed only briefly. A formal dining room that could seat 20. A living area with furniture that had never known the indignity of discount tags. A kitchen where staff worked silently. We stopped before a heavy wooden door. The man knocked twice. A deep voice from within called out, "Enter." As the door swung open, I took what might have been my last free breath and stepped into the lion's den. The study was dimly lit with wall-to-wall bookshelves and a massive desk that dominated the space. Behind it sat a man, his face partially shadowed by a desk lamp that cast a golden pool of light on the papers before him. He did not look up immediately, and I stood frozen in the doorway, heart hammering against my ribs. When he finally raised his eyes, the air left my lungs. He was not what I had expected. No aging crime boss with thinning hair and a thick neck. This man was younger, perhaps late 30s, with sharp features that seemed carved from marble. His dark hair was immaculately styled, and his suit looked tailored to fit his broad shoulders perfectly. But it was his eyes that held me, dark and assessing, containing a stillness that felt more dangerous than any overt threat. He said, my name in his mouth sounding like something precious and breakable, Miss Emma. Please sit. He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. I forced my legs to move, clutching my backpack in a white-knuckled grip as I sank into the chair. Up close, I could see the faint lines around his eyes, the slight shadow of stubble along his jaw, and a thin scar that ran along his right temple. He asked, his voice smooth and cultured, with just a hint of something foreign beneath the perfect English. Do you know who I am? I swallowed hard. I said, I think so. Castellano. He continued, I have heard the name on the news. A slight smile curved his lips. He asked, and what have you heard exactly? The truth caught in my throat. I had heard plenty. Suspected ties to organized crime, rumors of businesses that served as fronts, whispers of rivals who disappeared. None of it proven. All of it feared. I admitted, enough to be nervous. He leaned back, studying me with those unsettling eyes. He said, honesty. Refreshing. He slid a glass of amber liquid across the desk. He said, drink. You look like you need it. I shook my head. I said, I would rather keep a clear head. For a moment, something like approval flashed across his face. He took the glass back and sipped from it himself. He said, setting the glass down, you texted a number looking for someone named Jake. Tell me about him. I shifted uncomfortably. I said, he was a friend. I lent him money for his mother's medical bills. He promised to pay me back. He said, and you believed him. It was not a question, but I answered anyway. Yes, I did. He asked, why? The simple question caught me off guard. I said, because I thought he was a good person who needed help. Castellano's expression did not change, but something in his eyes darkened. He said, and this good person gave you a wrong number when it was time to repay his debt. Put that way, I felt naive and foolish. I said, apparently. He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder, laying it on the desk between us. He said, Jake Morrison, 29, no sick mother. Multiple accounts of fraud across 3 states. He flipped it open, revealing surveillance photos of Jake, smiling, carefree, with his arm around a blonde woman I had never seen. He continued, currently living quite comfortably in Phoenix on money taken from at least 7 other women with stories similar to yours. My stomach lurched. The photos were dated last week. I asked, how did you? He said simply, information is valuable, and I do not appreciate people using my personal number as their disposable contact. I stared at the photos, my chest tight with betrayal and humiliation. 6 months of extra shifts, of skipping meals, of falling behind on rent, all to help a mother who did not exist. I whispered, I am an idiot, Castellano said, his voice unexpectedly gentle. No, you are kind. The world takes advantage of kindness. He closed the folder and set it aside, then leaned forward, elbows on the desk, fingers steepled. He said, now, let us discuss why you are here. I looked up, confused. I said, I thought it was because I texted you by mistake. He replied, that is how we connected. Yes, but not why I sent my men to bring you here. His eyes moved deliberately from my face down to my worn sweater, the frayed cuffs, then back up. He asked, tell me about yourself, Emma. The truth. Something in his tone made it clear he already knew plenty, but was testing me. I straightened in the chair. I said, I am 25. I work double shifts at Miller's Diner downtown. I grew up in foster care, aged out of the system, put myself through 2 years of community college before I ran out of money. The words tumbled out bare and unvarnished. I continued, I have no family, no safety net. Jake was. I thought he was a friend. He added, and now you are about to be evicted. I nodded, the reality crashing back. Yes. He asked, what would you have done if my men had not come? The question made my chest ache because I had already been living the answer. I said, worked more shifts, slept in my car until I saved enough for a new deposit somewhere cheaper. Started over again. Something flickered in his expression. Not pity, which I would have hated, but something more complex. Recognition, perhaps. He said, rising from his chair. I have a proposition for you. He walked to the window, his back to me, silhouetted against the darkness outside. I noticed for the first time that a man stood discreetly by the door, another bulge visible beneath his jacket. The mansion suddenly felt like a beautiful prison, and I was acutely aware that I had walked in voluntarily. I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. What kind of proposition? Castellano turned, and the lamplight caught his profile. Strong jaw, straight nose, the suggestion of power in the set of his shoulders. He said, I need someone I can trust in my household. He walked back, each step measured and deliberate. He continued, someone without connections or complications. Someone honest. I said, you do not know that I am honest. He replied, I know you did not lie about your situation, even when it would have been easier. I know you tried to return money you desperately needed because you thought it was too much. His eyes held mine. He said, I know you have worked yourself to exhaustion rather than take shortcuts. A chill ran through me at how much he had discerned from our brief interaction, or how much he had already known before I arrived. I asked cautiously, what exactly would this job entail? He answered, initially, managing the household affairs, scheduling staff, overseeing certain aspects of day-to-day operations. I have people for security, cooking, cleaning, but I need someone to coordinate them. Someone discreet. I blinked in surprise. I said, I have no experience with any of that. He said, you have experience surviving, adapting. He returned to his seat. He continued, you would live here, of course, your own suite. All expenses covered, plus a salary generous enough to establish savings. Security. The offer hung in the air between us, tempting and terrifying. A way out of my endless struggle. A beautiful cage. I asked, why me? You could hire anyone with actual qualifications. His mouth quirked in what might have been amusement. He said, qualifications can be taught. Loyalty and discretion are rarer commodities. I said before I could stop myself, you cannot buy loyalty. Instead of anger, his expression showed something like satisfaction. He said precisely, which is why I am offering you an opportunity, not just money. He pushed a contract across the desk. He said, 3 months. If either of us is dissatisfied after that time, you walk away with a severance that will set you up comfortably wherever you choose to go. If not, we renegotiate terms. I stared at the paper, the legal language swimming before my eyes. The salary figure made me dizzy. I asked carefully, the things they say on the news. What about your business? His expression hardened slightly. He said, my business is my business. Your job would be the household only. He leaned forward. He said, I am not asking you to do anything illegal, Emma. Just to be loyal to this house and its secrets. I looked around the opulent study, thought of my leaking apartment, the endless shifts that still left me short, the betrayal from the one person I had trusted. I asked, may I have some time to think about it? He said, of course. He nodded to the man by the door. He said, Marco will show you to a guest room. Rest. Consider. We will speak again in the morning. As I stood to follow Marco, Castellano spoke again. He said, one more thing, Emma. I turned back, meeting those dark eyes. He said, I have taken the liberty of having your belongings packed and brought here, regardless of your decision tomorrow. My blood ran cold. I said, what? He replied, your apartment was unsafe. The building failed multiple code violations. I have had my lawyer begin proceedings against your landlord. His tone was matter of fact, as if he had not just completely overridden my autonomy. He added, consider it a gesture of goodwill. I stood frozen, torn between gratitude and fear at the casual display of power. He said, and if you say no tomorrow, then you will leave with your possessions, the money in that envelope, and no obligations. His eyes locked with mine. He said, I do not force people into my service, Emma. I merely provide compelling reasons for them to choose it. Marco cleared his throat softly from the doorway, and I followed him in a daze through the mansion's winding hallways. The guest room he showed me to was larger than my entire apartment with a 4-poster bed, an attached bathroom that featured a tub I could actually lie down in. Marco said, your things will be delivered shortly. If you need anything, press 0 on the phone by the bed. He hesitated, then added, Mr. Castellano rarely takes personal interest in new staff. I suggest you consider his offer seriously. After he left, I sank onto the edge of the bed, running my hands over the silken comforter. The room smelled of fresh linen and something citrusy, worlds away from my apartment's persistent scent of mildew. True to Marco's word, within an hour there was a knock at the door. A woman with a kind face and efficient movements wheeled in my pitiful collection of belongings. Clothes in garbage bags, a few books, my grandmother's quilt, the chipped mug I had had since college. She said, gesturing to the massive armoire that made my few items look even shabbier. "I have unpacked your clothes in the dresser, miss. Would you like me to press anything for tomorrow?" I shook my head, overwhelmed. "No, thank you. I am fine." After she left, I wandered the room, touching the expensive furnishings, opening drawers, peering out windows that overlooked manicured gardens now cloaked in night. I tried the door, unlocked. I could walk out right now and go where? With what? I sank into a plush armchair, hugging my grandmother's quilt. For the first time in years, I was not working, was not worrying, was not scrambling to survive. The sensation was so foreign it felt dangerous. In the massive bathroom, I ran a hot bath, something I had not been able to do in my apartment with its temperamental water heater. As I soaked in scented water, I weighed my options. Sigh, yes. Work for a man who was almost certainly involved in organized crime, but in a role that he claimed would keep me separate from that world. Live in luxury, earn more money than I had ever seen, and maybe finally build some security for myself. Say no. Walk away with enough money to temporarily solve my housing crisis, but eventually end up back in the same cycle of exhaustion and poverty. When I finally emerged from the bath, I found a silk nightgown laid out on the bed. Beside it was a note in bold, elegant handwriting. It read, "Consider all that could be yours. AC." I pulled on the nightgown, sliding between sheets softer than anything I had ever felt. Despite my racing thoughts, exhaustion pulled me under almost immediately. I dreamed of dark eyes intently watching me, also of golden cages with their doors left strangely open. My dreams included running down endless hallways, but these futile efforts always led me back. They returned me to the same study, the same desk, and the man waiting with a contract in his hands. Morning came with sunlight streaming through curtains I had forgotten to close, and another knock at the door. A different maid entered with a tray of coffee, fresh fruit, and pastries still warm from the oven, she said, setting the tray on a small table by the window. "Mr. Castellano requests your company for breakfast on the terrace in 1 hour, miss. Shall I help you select something to wear?" The reality of my situation crashed back. 1 hour to decide the course of my life. I said, "No, thank you. I can manage." After she left, I sipped the best coffee I had ever tasted and stared out at the immaculate grounds. In the daylight, the mansion was even more impressive. Sprawling wings extending from the main building, gardens blooming with late summer flowers, a pool glittering in the distance. I dressed in the best clothes I owned, jeans without holes, and a blouse I had found on clearance, and tried to tame my hair into something presentable. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. One night of proper rest and food had already softened the perpetual shadows under my eyes. What would a few months do? A year? A lifetime? The thought should have frightened me more than it did. A soft knock announced Marco, "Come to escort me to breakfast." As we walked through sun-drenched corridors, I made my decision. The terrace was set with fine china and silver, overlooking rose gardens that stretched to a stone fountain. Castellano stood when I approached, dressed more casually than the night before in tailored trousers and a crisp white shirt open at the collar. In the morning light, I could see flecks of amber in his dark eyes. He asked, pulling out a chair for me, "Did you sleep well?" I nodded, taking the seat. I said, "Better than I have in years." He said, "Good." He sat across from me, studying my face. He asked, "And have you made your decision?" I met his gaze steadily. I said, "I have conditions." A smile tugged at his lips, genuine amusement lighting his eyes. He said, "I am listening," I said, my heart pounding, but voice steady. "First, I will not do anything illegal no matter what." Castellano's expression remained neutral, as he poured coffee into fine porcelain cups. He said, "As I said, your role would be household management only." I continued, "Second, I want a written contract with clear terms reviewed by a lawyer that I choose." He raised an eyebrow and asked, "You have a lawyer?" I admitted, "No, but I will find one. With the money you have already given me." A hint of approval flickered in his eyes. He said, "Fair." I took a deep breath. I said, "Third condition. I want to know the truth about who you are and what you do. Not rumors, not news reports. If I am going to work for you, I need to know what I am walking into." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by birdsong from the gardens below. A server appeared with plates of eggs, Benedict, and fresh fruit, then disappeared just as silently. Castellano leaned forward, his voice dropping. He said, "That is a dangerous request, Emma." I countered, surprising myself with my boldness. More dangerous than agreeing to live in the home of a stranger who sent armed men to collect me? He studied me for a long moment, then seemed to come to a decision. He said, "Antonio Castellano, first-generation American, born to Italian immigrants. I inherited certain family businesses upon my father's death 15 years ago. I have since expanded those interests into legitimate enterprises, real estate, shipping, private equity. I pressed. And the illegitimate ones? His jaw tightened. He said, protection, dispute resolution, movement of certain goods through channels that avoid excessive taxation or regulation. His eyes never left mine. He continued, I do not deal in human trafficking. I do not touch children. I do not sell drugs to kids. I have a code. A code. As if that made everything okay. The question slipped out before I could stop it. Have you killed people? He did not flinch. He said, not personally, not in many years, but I have given orders that resulted in deaths. Yes, my stomach clenched, but I forced myself to hold his gaze. I asked, why are you telling me this? Are you not worried I could go to the police? A small, cold smile touched his lips. He said, with what evidence? Besides, you asked for truth. I respect that enough to provide it. He took a sip of his coffee. He then asked, now do you still want the job? I looked down at the untouched food before me. The fine silver cutlery that probably cost more than a month's rent. Beyond the terrace, gardeners worked meticulously on the sprawling grounds. Somewhere, a fountain burbled softly. I said finally, surprising myself with how certain I felt. Yes, but I have one more condition. He waited, expression guarded. I said, if I ever want to leave for any reason, I walk away clean. No threats, no consequences, no men showing up at my door in the future. For the first time, he looked genuinely surprised. Then he extended his hand across the table. He said, you have my word. I hesitated, then took it. His grip was warm and firm, and a strange current seemed to run from his skin to mine. He said softly, welcome to the household, Emma. Shall we discuss your duties? The next week passed in a blur of learning. The mansion operated with the precision of a small corporation with staff for every conceivable function. Groundskeepers, housekeepers, kitchen staff, security, drivers, even a sommelier for Castellano's extensive wine collection. My role, I discovered, was essentially being the conductor of this orchestra. I was to know everyone's schedule, ensure all household operations ran smoothly, and most importantly, act as a buffer between the staff and Castellano himself. Marco explained as he walked me through the staff quarters one afternoon. He values his privacy. Before you, he cycled through 3 household managers in 2 years. None had the temperament for the position. I asked, not entirely sure I wanted to know. What happened to them? Marco shrugged. He said, seeing my expression, they were encouraged to seek employment elsewhere with generous severance packages. Mr. Castellano rewards loyalty well, and he makes separation attractive when relationships do not work out. I caught the subtle warning beneath his words. Castellano made problems disappear one way or another. I was given an office adjacent to the main kitchen, with monitors showing security feeds from around the property and a tablet programmed with everyone's schedules and duties. My own schedule was demanding. Up at 6 a.m. to review the day's agenda, meetings with the head of each department, handling any issues that arose, and a daily briefing with Castellano himself, usually over dinner in his study. Those dinners became the strangest part of my new routine, seated across from him in the intimate space, sharing meals prepared by his private chef. We talked about the household, yes, but also books, music, art. He was surprisingly well-read with opinions on everything from Russian literature to contemporary jazz. Sometimes it was easy to forget who he was, what he was. And then a reminder would come, sharp and sudden, a hushed conversation ending when I entered a room, men in suits arriving for closed-door meetings, the constant watchful presence of security throughout the property. I saw none of the business directly, but its shadows were everywhere. 2 weeks into my new role, I was working late in my office when a commotion erupted outside. Raised voices, the sound of running feet. I opened the door cautiously to see Marco and 2 other security men hustling Castellano through the hallway toward his private wing. His white shirt was splattered with red, his face set in a cold mask I had not seen since that first night. Blood. That was blood on his shirt. Our eyes met briefly as he passed. Something flickered in his. A hint of regret, perhaps, that I had seen this side of him. Then he was gone, whisked away behind the heavy double doors that led to his private quarters. I stood frozen in the hallway, the reality of my situation crashing back like a wave. I had made a deal with a devil, gilded and cultured as he might be. That night, I could not sleep. I paced my beautiful suite, weighing options. I could leave now with the money I had already saved from my generous salary, disappear before I saw something I could not unsee, became complicit in something I could not forgive. A soft knock at my door startled me from my thoughts. It was nearly midnight. I opened it cautiously to find Castellano himself, changed now into a fresh shirt and suit pants, his hair slightly damp as if from a recent shower. No trace of blood remained, but the cold hardness in his eyes had not quite faded. He asked, his voice lower than usual. "May I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped back, allowing him into my space. He entered but did not sit, instead moving to the window to look out at the moonlit gardens. He said, not a question, but a statement. "You are considering leaving?" I asked, "How did you?" He replied, "Your face when you saw me earlier. I know fear when I see it." He turned to face me. He said, "I will not stop you." The simple statement hung between us. I crossed my arms, suddenly aware I was wearing only a thin nightgown. I asked, "Then why are you here?" He moved closer, his presence filling the room. He said, "To explain, if you will listen." I nodded, not trusting my voice. He said quietly, "The blood was not mine. It belonged to one of my men. There was an incident with a rival organization. Marco brought me to identify the body." A chill ran through me. I asked, "He is dead?" He said, "Yes." No emotion colored the word. He continued, "He knew the risks of his position." I asked, finding my voice, "And that is supposed to make me feel better about staying?" His expression softened slightly. He said, "No, nothing could make this palatable to someone like you. I am merely providing context." I whispered, "Context for murder." He countered, "For survival. My world has different rules, Emma. I did not create them, but I navigate them." He moved closer still, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something woody and expensive. He said, "You have not seen that side of my life until today because I have kept it separate from the household, from you." The question escaped before I could stop it. "Why?" His eyes searched mine. He said, "Because when you walked into my study that first night, I saw something rare, something I wanted to preserve." I asked, "What?" He said simply, "Integrity. You had nothing, yet you tried to return money you desperately needed. You have worked yourself to exhaustion rather than compromise your principles. You looked me in the eye and asked if I had killed people. I swallowed hard. I said, 'That is not special. It is just decent.' He replied, 'Decency is precious in my world.'" His hand rose, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. The touch sent electricity down my spine. He said, "Stay, Emma. Keep managing the household. I promise the business will remain separate." I stepped back, needing distance to think clearly. I said, "I do not know if I can compartmentalize like that. Pretend I do not know what happens beyond these walls." He replied, "You do not have to pretend. Just focus on what is within them." His gaze was intense, almost pleading. He said, "Give it the full 3 months. If you still want to leave, then I will honor our agreement." Something in his voice made me pause. I asked, "Why is this so important to you?" For a moment, vulnerability flickered across his face so quickly I almost missed it. Then his mask slipped back into place. He said, "Because competent people are rare, and I have invested time in your training." It was a lie, or at least not the whole truth. But before I could press further, he was moving toward the door. He said, his hand on the doorknob, "Think about it. Let me know your decision in the morning." After he left, I sat on the edge of my bed, trembling slightly. The smart choice would be to pack my things and leave tonight. But something held me back. Curiosity, perhaps, or something more dangerous. Morning found me still in the mansion, presenting the day's schedule to Castellano in his study, as if the night before had never happened. The relief in his eyes was the only acknowledgement of my decision to stay. Weeks passed. I settled deeper into my role, earning the respect of the staff as I learned to anticipate needs, solve problems, and maintain the delicate balance of the household. I rarely saw evidence of Castellano's other life, true to his promise to keep it separate, but I felt his eyes on me often during meetings, across dinner tables, as I moved through the rooms, coordinating staff. Not cold or assessing anymore, but something warmer, more complex. One evening in late October, I was in the library updating the inventory of his rare book collection when he found me. The room was my favorite in the mansion, with floor-to-ceiling shelves, leather chairs worn to perfect softness, and a fireplace that cast golden light across the space. He observed, closing the door behind him, working late again. I glanced up from my tablet and said, "Just finishing the inventory you requested." He moved to a cabinet in the corner, opened it to reveal a selection of liquors. He asked, "Drink?" I agreed, setting aside my work. Just one. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid, handed one to me, then settled into the chair opposite. In the firelight, the sharp angles of his face softened, making him look younger, almost vulnerable. He said, swirling the liquid in his glass, You have done well these past weeks. Better than I anticipated. I said, "Thank you." I took a small sip, letting the expensive scotch warm my throat. I added, "I am a quick learner." He said, "More than that. You have transformed the household." His eyes met mine over the rim of his glass. He continued, "The staff respects you, even Marco, which is no small feat." I smiled despite myself. Marco, I discovered, was Castellano's right-hand man, as much protector as employee. Earning his grudging approval had been a victory. Castellano continued, his tone casual, but his eyes intent. "I have been meaning to ask, have you used your days off to look for another position?" The question caught me off guard. "No." "Why?" He set his glass down. He said, "Our 3-month agreement ends next week. I assumed you would be planning your exit strategy." I had not realized the time had passed so quickly. The thought of leaving sent an unexpected pang through my chest. I admitted, "I have not been looking." Something like satisfaction flickered across his face. He said, "Then perhaps we should discuss a more permanent arrangement." "Permanent," I said. He leaned forward. He said, "I would like you to stay on. Same role, increased salary, better benefits." I asked, "For how long?" He replied, "Indefinitely." His eyes never left mine. He added, "Unless you have other plans." I took another sip, buying time to sort through my thoughts. The truth was, I had no desire to leave. Despite the moral complexities of Castellano's world, I had found something here I had never had before. Stability, respect, purpose, and something else. Something I was afraid to name that flared whenever he looked at me the way he was looking at me now. I asked carefully, "What about our other agreement? About keeping your business separate from the household?" His expression grew serious. He said, "That remains in place. You have been a sanctuary, Emma. A place apart from the rest of my life. I would not change that." The word sanctuary hung between us, heavy with implication. I set my glass down, suddenly warm despite the distance from the fire. I said quietly, "I will stay, but I need to know something first." He waited, tense. I asked, "Why me? Really?" "Not the reasons you gave before. The truth." For a long moment, he was silent. The only sound the crackling of the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, softer, stripped of its usual careful control. He said, "Because you look at me and see a man, not a position or a name or a threat. Because you have never once lied to me or yourself about who I am, yet you stayed anyway." He exhaled slowly. He continued, "Because for the first time in 15 years, I have someone in my home I can trust completely." The raw honesty in his voice made my chest ache. I knew what it cost him. This man who lived behind walls of wealth and power and fear to admit such vulnerability. I said simply, "Thank you, for the truth." He nodded once, then rose, the moment breaking. He said, "We will draw up new contracts tomorrow." As he reached the door, he paused, looking back at me framed in firelight. He said, "Good night, Emma." I replied, using his first name for the first time, "Good night, Antonio." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, pleasure. I could not tell. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with the fire and the dangerous warmth blooming in my chest. The new contract was signed the following day. My position in the Castellano household made official with terms more generous than I could have imagined. My salary doubled with provisions for healthcare, retirement, and even education should I wish to complete my degree. I tried not to think about where the money came from. Winter descended on the mansion, transforming the grounds into a wonderland of pristine snow and ice-laden trees. Christmas approached, bringing with it a flurry of preparations, decorations throughout the massive house, gifts for staff members, and plans for a small holiday gathering of Castellano's closest associates. He instructed me one evening as we reviewed the plans in his study. Nothing extravagant. Just good food, good wine, and privacy. I made notes on my tablet. I asked, "How many guests should we expect?" He said, "No more than 15. He moved to stand by the fire, his profile sharp against the flames. He continued, "These are important people, Emma. My inner circle, some family, some business associates." I understood the unspoken message. These were people deeply connected to his other life, the one I pretended not to see. I promised, "I will ensure everything is perfect." He turned, watching me with that intensity that still made my heart skip. He said, "I know you will." He hesitated, then added, "I would like you to attend as well, not as staff, but as my guest." I looked up, surprised. "Your guest?" I said. He asked, "Is that so strange? You run my household. You should be present." I said. "The other guests might find it unusual." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. He said, "Let me worry about that." The night of the party arrived with a fresh snowfall that muffled the world outside. I stood in front of my closet, staring at the handful of nice outfits I had acquired since coming to work for Castellano. None seemed appropriate for a gathering of what I assumed would be powerful, dangerous people. A knock at my door interrupted my deliberation. A maid stood outside with a large white box tied with a black satin ribbon. She said, handing it over with a knowing smile, "Mr. Castellano asked me to deliver this, miss." Inside was a dress of deep emerald silk, simply cut but clearly expensive, with a note in Castellano's bold handwriting. It read, "For tonight, a C." The dress fit perfectly, of course. I wondered briefly how he knew my size, then remembered the extensive staff at his disposal. My hair I wore loose with minimal makeup, nothing that suggested I was trying too hard to impress. When I entered the main parlor where guests were gathering, conversations paused momentarily. I felt eyes assessing, categorizing, dismissing, or filing away the information of my presence. Castellano moved immediately to my side, a hand at the small of my back guiding me into the room. He said, his voice carrying easily, "Everyone, this is Emma, who manages my household affairs." A silver-haired woman with sharp eyes approached first, taking my measure with a glance. She said, her Italian accent more pronounced than Castellano's, "So, you are the one Antonio has been hiding away." "I was beginning to think he had invented you," Castellano said, a warning in his tone. "Aunt Sophia." She waved him off. She said, "I am merely making conversation, nephew." "To me," she added, "he is very protective of you." "Interesting." Before I could formulate a response, Castellano steered me toward other guests. Men with expensive watches and calculating eyes, women with perfect makeup and knowing smiles. I recognized a few faces from news reports and society pages, people whose legitimate businesses were rumored to be fronts for other activities. I sipped champagne and made careful conversation, revealing nothing while observing everything. These people were like Castellano, polished on the surface, dangerous underneath. I could feel currents of power and old rivalries swirling beneath the pleasant exchanges. One man in particular watched me throughout the evening, younger than most guests, perhaps early 30s, with dark blonde hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. When Castellano was momentarily engaged with his aunt, the man approached, standing too close for comfort. He said, emphasizing the title in a way that made it sound like a euphemism, "So, you are Antonio's new household manager." I said, taking a small step back, "That is correct." He said, "Unusual position for someone with your background." His eyes traveled down my dress, then back up. He added, "Or lack thereof." I replied evenly. My qualifications satisfied Mr. Castellano. His smile widened, predatory. He said, "I am sure they did. I am Vincent Moretti. Antonio and I do business together sometimes." He leaned closer. He said, when he is not too busy playing house. A presence materialized at my side. "Marco," his expression pleasant, but his eyes cold. He said pointedly, ignoring Moretti, "Mr. Castellano is asking for you, miss." I nodded politely to Moretti. I said, "Of course, if you will excuse me." As Marco led me away, he muttered, "Stay clear of that one." Bad blood between him and the boss. I found Castellano by the fireplace, deep in conversation with an older man. He looked up as I approached, something softening in his expression. He said, extending a hand to draw me into their circle, "Emma, I was just telling Judge Romano about your remarkable efficiency." The judge, a retired federal judge I would later learn, nodded politely. He said, "Antonio says you have transformed the running of this place. No small feat given its complexities." I smiled noncommittally, wondering how much the judge knew about those complexities. The evening progressed smoothly. Dinner served in the formal dining room with its crystal chandelier and antique silver. I was seated to Castellano's right, a position of honor that raised eyebrows among some guests. Throughout the meal, I felt his attention constantly returning to me, checking my comfort, ensuring I was included in conversations. After dinner, as guests moved back to the parlor for digestives, Aunt Sophia cornered me by the grand piano. She said bluntly, "You are not what I expected." I asked, "What did you expect?" She said, "The usual type, model, actress, gold digger." She studied me over her glass of grappa. She continued, "You are different. You see him." I frowned. I said, "I am just an employee, Mrs. Sophia." She waved away my protest. She said, "Just Sophia. I have known my nephew his whole life. I know when he is invested." She leaned closer. She said, "Be careful, girl. Antonio does not do anything halfway. Business. Vendettas. Or women. Before I could respond, Moretti appeared again, this time directing his attention to Sophia. He said, kissing her cheeks, "Aunt Sophia, beautiful as always." She received his greeting coolly. She said, "Vincent, I did not realize Antonio had invited you," he said, his eyes sliding to me. "Family business concerns us all, does it not? Even new additions." A hand closed around my elbow. Castellano, his expression pleasant, but his eyes hard. He said, "Emma, would you help me with something in my study?" I excused myself and followed him through the house to his private sanctuary, away from the noise of the gathering. As soon as the door closed behind us, his facade dropped. He said, his voice tight with controlled anger, "I apologize for Moretti. He will not bother you again." I assured him, "It is fine. I can handle difficult people." He said, "Not like him. Vincent is." He paused, searching for words. He continued, "Unstable, dangerous, the son of my father's oldest friend, which is the only reason he still breathes." The coldness in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. I asked, "Why did you invite him then?" He said, "Politics. Family obligations." He moved to his desk, poured 2 glasses of brandy, and handed one to me. He said, "I am sorry you had to deal with him and with the scrutiny." I took a sip, letting the alcohol warm me. I said, "Your aunt is direct." A genuine smile broke through his tension. He said, "Sophia has never censored herself a day in her life, but she means well." I said, watching his reaction carefully, "She seems to think there is something between us. Beyond employer and employee." His eyes met mine, dark and unreadable. He asked, "And what did you tell her?" I replied, "That I work for you. Nothing more." He set his glass down, moved closer. He asked, "Is that how you see it?" "Nothing more." My heart hammered in my chest. I asked, "How do you see it?" He reached out slowly, giving me time to step away. When I did not, his hand cupped my cheek, thumb brushing over my skin. He said, "I think you know." The electricity between us was undeniable now, had been building for months. I knew I should pull away. He was my employer, a dangerous man with blood on his hands. But in that moment, I could not remember why that mattered. I whispered, "Antonio." Not quite a question, not quite a warning. He leaned in, his breath warm against my lips. He murmured, "Tell me to stop." His kiss was gentle at first, questioning, then deepening as I responded. My glass fell forgotten to the carpet as my hands found his shoulders, his chest, the solid warmth of him beneath expensive fabric. His arms encircled me, drawing me closer, one hand tangling in my hair. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. He said, "I have wanted to do that since the night you walked into my study." I whispered, even as my body betrayed me by leaning into his touch, "This is a bad idea." He said, "Probably." His fingers traced my jawline. He asked, "Does that change how you feel?" The question hung between us, heavy with implication. Did it? Could I separate the man who held me so tenderly from the one who ordered deaths, who operated in a world of violence and power? A sharp knock interrupted the moment. Marco's voice came through the door. He said, "Boss, we have a situation." Castellano's expression hardened instantly. He stepped back, straightening his tie. He instructed, his voice falling back into the cool authority I knew so well. "Wait here." After he left, I sank into one of the leather chairs, touching my lips where I could still feel the pressure of his. What was I doing? This was not just crossing a professional boundary. This was stepping willingly into danger. But when he returned 20 minutes later, his face grim, I knew I had already made my choice. He said, "The party is ending early. There has been an incident that requires my attention." I stood. I asked, "Should I go back to my room?" His eyes softened momentarily. He said, "Yes, this is not something you should be involved in." He hesitated, then added, "We will talk tomorrow, Emma. About this. About us. Us." The word echoed in my mind as I made my way back to my quarters, slipping past departing guests and security personnel moving with unusual urgency through the halls. From my window, I watched black cars pull away from the mansion, carrying Castellano's associates into the snowy night. One remained, a sleek Bentley idling by the front entrance. Minutes later, Castellano emerged, flanked by Marco and 2 other security men, all of them now armed visibly. He paused before getting into the car, looking up toward the wing where my room was located. I stepped back from the window, not wanting to be seen, but not before our eyes met across the distance. Even from afar, I could read the silent message in his gaze. "Wait for me. I will come back." The car disappeared into the night, leaving me alone with the realization that I had fallen in love with a man whose world would always be divided. Part of it mine to share, part of it a darkness I could never fully know or accept. Morning came with no sign of Castellano's return. I went through my duties mechanically, checking schedules, meeting with staff, all while trying to ignore the hollow feeling in my chest. No one mentioned the abrupt end to the party or the master's absence, though I caught worried glances exchanged between the security team. Around noon, Marco found me in the conservatory where I was reviewing plans for an upcoming renovation. He said without preamble, "He is back. In his private quarters. He is asking for you." My heart leaped, then settled into a steady thrum of anxiety. I asked, "Is he? Is everything okay?" Marco's expression remained neutral. He said, "It is not my place to say. He will explain." I followed him through the mansion to Castellano's private wing, an area I rarely entered. He led me past the study to a set of double doors I had never been through before. He knocked once, then stepped aside. Marco said, then added in a lower voice, "He is waiting. He has not slept. Be patient." With that cryptic advice, he left me standing before the imposing doors. I took a deep breath and knocked softly. Castellano's voice, rougher than usual, said, "Come in." I entered a spacious bedroom dominated by a massive four-poster bed. The curtains were drawn against the midday sun, casting the room in shadow. Castellano stood by the window, a sliver of light outlining his silhouette. He had changed clothes, but his posture spoke of exhaustion. I said, remaining by the door, "You asked for me." He turned and I had to suppress a gasp. A dark bruise bloomed across his left cheekbone, and a cut above his eyebrow had been recently stitched. He said, my name sounding like relief in his mouth, "Emma." He moved toward me, favoring his right side slightly. He said, "Thank you for coming." I asked, stepping closer despite myself, "What happened? Are you hurt anywhere else?" He gestured vaguely toward his ribs. He said, "Nothing serious. Some bruising." I instructed, professional concern momentarily overriding the complicated emotions swirling between us. "Sit down. Have you seen a doctor?" He sank into an armchair by the unlit fireplace. He said, "Our family physician patched me up. I am fine, Emma." I perched on the edge of the chair opposite him. I asked, "Was it because of the party? Something to do with Moretti?" His expression darkened. He said, "Yes. Vincent decided to send a message. It has been handled." The flat certainty in his voice sent a chill down my spine. I did not ask what handled meant. He continued, his voice softening. "I did not ask you here to discuss business. I wanted to talk about last night. About us." "Us?" There it was again, that dangerous word. I said quietly, "There cannot be an us, Antonio." "Not really." Pain flickered across his face, deeper than the physical injuries. He said, "Because of what I am." I replied, "Because I cannot compartmentalize like you can. I cannot love the man and ignore the Mafia boss." The word love slipped out before I could stop it, hanging between us like a confession. He leaned forward, wincing slightly at the movement. He asked, "What if you did not have to?" I said, "What do you mean?" He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. He said, "I have been thinking about this for months, Emma. Since before you came here, my father built this empire on blood and fear. I inherited it, continued it, because I knew nothing else. But lately," he trailed off, eyes fixed on something distant. I prompted, "Lately?" His gaze returned to me, intent and honest. He said, "Lately, I have been wondering if there is another way. If I could transition completely to legitimate business over time." My breath caught. I asked, "Is that even possible after everything?" He said, "Difficult, but not impossible. I have been moving in that direction for years. Real estate, shipping, tech, investments. The other activities could be phased out gradually." His voice gained confidence as he spoke. He continued, "It would mean challenges, risks. Some of my associates would not take it well." I said, "Like Moretti." He nodded grimly. "Among others. But it could be done with the right motivation." The implication hung heavily between us. I was that motivation. I asked, "Why are you telling me this now?" He stood, moving to kneel before my chair despite his injuries, taking my hands in his. He said, "Because last night changed everything. Because I need you to know that I am willing to change everything for you." My heart raced. I said, "Antonio, I cannot ask you to." He said, "You are not asking. I am offering." His hands tightened on mine. He said, "I have lived in darkness so long, Emma. You brought light back into my life. A purpose beyond power and survival." Tears pricked behind my eyes. I said, "This is not a fairy tale. People like you do not just walk away from that life." He agreed, No, they do not. It would take time. Years, maybe. There would be danger. His eyes never left mine. He said, but it would be real. A future where you would not have to pretend not to see parts of me. I stood, needing space to think. This was too much. The offer too grand. The implications too overwhelming. I said finally, I need time. It is not a small thing you are proposing. He rose slowly, clearly in pain, but refusing to show it. He said, take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere. He hesitated, then added, neither are you, I hope. I assured him, I will stay, but as household manager only, until I decide. Relief softened his features. He said, fair enough. As I reached the door, he called my name once more. I turned back. He said, whatever you decide, Emma, know this. What I feel for you is real, perhaps the only real thing in my life. I nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in my throat, and slipped out the door. The weeks that followed were a careful dance. I maintained my professional role during the day, running the household with the efficiency everyone had come to expect. Castellano respected my request for space, our interactions limited to necessary business discussions. I carefully observed him, noticing he began taking more meetings with legitimate business associates. I also watched as certain visitors, who had once been regulars, stopped coming to the mansion entirely. He furthermore spent prolonged hours in his private study, consulting with lawyers and accountants. He was serious about his offer. He was trying to change for me. It terrified me. Not just the danger such a transition would bring, but the responsibility. Could I really be the catalyst for transforming a man like Antonio Castellano? Did I have that right? Winter deepened. Snow piling around the mansion, insulating us in our strange, suspended state. Christmas passed quietly. Castellano gave all the staff generous bonuses and gifts tailored to each person's tastes. Mine was a first edition of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, wrapped simply with a note that read, no expectations, just because I know you love it. A C. The gesture undid me. That night, I stood outside his study for a full 5 minutes before finding the courage to knock. He called, come in. He was alone, working at his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, a humanizing detail I had always found endearing. He looked up, surprise and pleasure washing across his face when he saw me. He said, Emma, is everything all right? I closed the door behind me, heart pounding. I said, thank you for the book. It is perfect. He said, you are welcome. He set his work aside, giving me his full attention. He continued, I remembered you mentioned it was your favorite. I said, 3 months ago in passing. I smiled despite my nerves. I said, you remember everything, do you not? He said, about you? Yes. No artifice, just simple truth. I moved closer, perching on the edge of a chair across from him. I said, I have been thinking about your offer. About us. He went very still, waiting. I said, echoing our first real conversation all those months ago. I have conditions. A small smile touched his lips. He said, I am listening. I said, complete transparency. I want to know everything. Where the money comes from, how you are transitioning the business, all of it. He nodded slowly. He said, it will not be pretty, Emma. I said, I know, but no more shadows between us. He said, agreed. I said, next condition. I took a deep breath. I continued, if we do this, really do this, I need to know it is for you, not just for me. That you want this change for your own life, not just to make me happy. He rose, circled the desk to stand before me. He asked, I want it for both reasons. Does that count? I stood to face him. I said, yes, as long as it is sincere. He asked softly, close enough now that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. And your final condition? I said, that you understand I am not promising forever yet. I am promising to try to see if we can build something real from this complicated beginning. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, his touch achingly gentle. He said, I can work with that. I closed the distance between us, pressing my lips to his in a kiss that felt like stepping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating. His arms encircled me, pulling me against him as the kiss deepened, months of restrained emotion finally breaking free. When we parted, breathless, he kept me close, his forehead resting against mine. He whispered, I love you, Emma. I think I have since you tried to return my money that first night. I smiled, tears blurring my vision. I said, I love you too. God help me, but I do. Spring came early that year, melting the snow and revealing new life across the estate grounds. With it came changes. Some subtle, some dramatic. Castellano's legitimate businesses expanded rapidly. Certain associates stopped coming to the mansion entirely. New faces appeared: business consultants, investment advisors, tech entrepreneurs. There were challenges, of course, threats from former associates who felt betrayed, tense meetings behind closed doors, nights when Antonio came to bed late, worry etched in the lines of his face. But he kept his promise of transparency, sharing everything, the good and the bad. And there was good. So much of it. The weight of darkness gradually lifting from his shoulders. The genuine joy he found in building something legitimate. The nights we spent talking about the future. Planning, dreaming. A year after that fateful text message, we stood in the garden behind the mansion, now abloom with spring flowers. The staff had gathered at a discreet distance, Marco among them, his usual stoic expression softened by the occasion. Antonio asked, taking my hands in his, "Are you sure about this? It is not too late to change your mind." I looked up at him, this complex man who had transformed his life for love, who was still transforming, who had shown me that people can change when given the right reasons. I replied, "I have never been more sure of anything." The justice of the peace stepped forward, opening his book as Antonio slipped a ring onto my finger. Not ostentatious diamonds, but a simple band of intertwined gold and silver, a symbol of our two worlds, now merged into one. He said, "I, Antonio Castellano, take you, Emma Foster." As he spoke his vows, I thought about the strange twist of fate that had brought us here. A wrong number, a desperate plea, a decision to take a chance. I thought about the text message that had changed everything. The hours that followed when his men brought me to his mansion, and every moment since that had led us to this garden, this promise, this future. I said when my turn came, meaning it with every fiber of my being, "I do." Later, as we danced alone on the terrace under a canopy of stars, Antonio pulled me close. He murmured against my hair, "No regrets." I thought of the journey, complicated, dangerous, beautiful, and the distance still to go. The past we could not erase but could move beyond. The future we were building one decision at a time. I whispered back, "None. Some wrong numbers are meant to be answered." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that still made my heart skip and pulled me closer as we danced beneath the stars. No longer divided by shadows, but united in light.